they said, "Certainly not." When he looked at them and said, "What then is this that is written? The stone which the builders rejected has become the chief cornerstone. Whoever falls on this stone will be broken, but on whomever it falls, it will grind him into powder." And the chief priests and the scribes that very hour sought to lay hands on him, but they feared the people, for they knew he had spoken this parable against them.
Not the right section of Scripture,
What?
but
My bad.
but it does follow. Jesus is telling a parable
Why did you say something?
of the vine dresser, and it's harvest season, and he needs laborers. So Jesus in this parable, the owner of the vineyard sends out for people to come in and come work. And every time he sends out people to have come work, they either kill them or they beat out the servants. And in this case, when Robert's reading right here, finally the owner of the vineyard sends out his own son to bring in people, and yet they kill him. Same thing happens with us. God is the owner of the vineyard, and he sends out us to bring in other people to help with the vineyard, with the harvest. Some of us will be beaten. Some of us will be killed. And even Jesus, throughout all of biblical history, we see God sending out the prophets as people trying to bring in people to work on the harvest. We see God using kings and other people throughout the Old Testament. And then God finally gets sick of the people killing the prophets and persecuting those that are bringing this good message to bring them into reaping this great harvest. He finally sends his son. And what do? They kill him. But it was all in his plan. I already know where you're going. But Luke chapter 21, verses 12 through 19.
Sorry about that.
It ended up working. It's okay. But before all this, they will lay hands on you and persecute you. They will deliver you to synagogues and prisons, and you will be brought before kings and governors, and all on account of my name. This will result with your being witness to them. But make up your mind not to worry beforehand how you will defend yourselves. For I will give you the words and wisdom that none of your adversaries will be able to resist or contradict. You will be betrayed even by parents, brothers, relatives, friends, and they'll put some of you to death. All men will hate you because of me, but not a hair of your head will perish. But by standing firm, you will gain life. Brothers, sisters, parents, family. That's what happened when I came to Christ. My parents are unbelievers. When I told my parents I was going to become a pastor, they about flipped on me. They said, you're going to be spending all this money for school, and you're not going to be getting paid much. How are you going to raise a family? How are you going to, they just were very concerned, and they're like, why don't you go into business, or why don't you do something else? They had a cow. I understood that persecution was going to come. Just as we were talking with Paul, the brother who just came to the Lord this week, he has a girlfriend who's very much steeped in Catholic tradition, wants him to become Catholic and go to Mass and go to confession and take communion. And it's like, we were telling him, be careful, because there's going to be conflict there right off the bat. And even thankfully within his family, most of his family members are saved. But there's still going to come those conflicts, even as Jesus is telling them there. I love it what he says here in verse 14. But make up your mind not to worry beforehand on how you will defend yourselves. Verse 15. For I will give you the words and wisdom that none of your adversaries will be able to resist or conflict. Peter chapter 3 tells us that we are to always be ready to give an answer to the hope that lies within us. And here Jesus is telling us that he'll give us the words and the wisdom to use in those situations. When you're coming under a trial, when you're coming under persecution, God will give you the things to say. Here in Luke chapter 21, he says that the persecution is because you will be a witness. So every time that we're coming under this persecution, God has in mind for us to be a witness during that time. Just as a couple of years ago, I was at Target, and Christy was going through one of her phases of not feeling well and lots of doctor's visits. And everybody kind of knew what was going on with Christy at my work. And a lady had come up to me, and I guess she had been watching me for some time. She's like, how can you remain calm when all this is going on? And at that moment, somehow, God had given me the words to speak to help lead this woman to Christ. She had been searching. God had planted me there, not because I'm anybody special, and without me even knowing it, used my life and my example to have someone reach out and say, how is it you have this peace? How is it you're so calm? Just as Jesus here in Luke 21 is telling us during these times, well, let's be ready. He'll give us the words to say. There's a reason we're all going through this. Excuse me. And it brings me to a couple of stories. If you're interested in what's going on around in the world of the church and how the church is being persecuted, there's a website called Voice of the Martyrs. I have their poster up in my office. It shows how many countries are hostile to the Bible and the gospel, and how many countries where the Bible is restricted and you have to abide by certain laws. And here's two stories specifically from China, a country in which a ministry that I'm involved in is very active. This is a story from late last year. On October 19th, police officials arrested 60 Christians attending a worship service, according to the China Aid Association. After charging them with disturbing social orders under the name of religious activities, police fined 5 brothers and sentenced them to 10 days administrative detention. On October 30th, police decided to increase the sentence of the church's leader to a 1-year reduction through labor in addition to an exorbitant fine. When the police came to Brother Go's home to arrest him, they brutally pushed his wife to the floor, and the impact caused a concussion and broke her 12th vertebrae. She continues to suffer from severe migraines and can barely move her back from the pain. Voice of the Martyrs has stood with persecuted Christians in China for more than 30 years, and they encourage you to pray that he will be released and that the fines will be dropped and that God will heal his wife. Here's another story from November 7th. House leader, I can't pronounce his name, 36, was sentenced to 15 years in prison for providing state secrets to overseas organizations, supposedly. This person's sentence was